My name is Emily, and I'm 32 years old. For the last 6 months, I've been living alone in Denver, almost 2,000 miles from my family. In all that time, not a single one of them even noticed my disappearance. The freedom I felt was priceless, as if for the first time in years, I had emerged from the depths and breathed fresh air. But yesterday, the phone rang, my father's name flashed on the screen, and a chill went down my spine. It turned out my younger brother, Ryan, is getting ready for his wedding, and suddenly the family decided to remember that I exist. As I tell this story of how I learned to set boundaries and stand up for myself, please write in the comments where you're watching this video from. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you've also had to deal with loved ones who never truly saw you. Being part of the Harper family meant sharing a house with 4 other people, but for some reason, I always felt like it was me against the world. My father, Robert, was a successful lawyer, a man with a powerful presence who demanded perfection in everything. My mother, Linda, acted as the perfect homemaker, schedules, to-do lists, and strict order defined our every day. I had 2 brothers. The older one, Daniel, was only 3 years ahead of me but had already earned a reputation as the golden boy, successful in sports, academics, and anything he put his mind to. The younger one, Ethan, was 5 years my junior, and his every tiny achievement was met by our parents as if it were a national holiday. And I was stuck in the middle, the invisible daughter whose presence seemed to get lost between 2 bright stars. It wasn't about cruelty or intentional neglect from my parents. They just seemed to look right through me. Their attention was always fixed on my brothers. I still vividly remember my high school graduation. To be the top student, I spent countless evenings with my notes while others were out at parties. The ceremony was on a weekday, a Thursday afternoon. When I stepped up to the microphone and looked out at the hall full of guests, I couldn't find a single familiar face. Later, I found out why. Daniel had a college league baseball game that very day, and my parents decided it was more important. Ethan was sick, and my mom decided to stay home with him. No one even thought it was necessary to offer me a word of apology for their absence. Sometime later, I participated in an art contest in college and won first place. A whole series of my paintings was dedicated to the feeling of invisibility, and that was especially symbolic. But even then, at the awards ceremony, my family was once again not in the audience. When I brought home the red winner's ribbon, it was set aside because that same week, Ethan made the junior volleyball team, and all of our parents' attention shifted solely to him. I tried everything to get my family's attention. I changed my style one after another, first a goody two-shoes, then dark goth, and later, a free-spirited bohemian. But it seemed like no one even noticed these changes. I joined clubs, took up sports, participated in volunteer projects, just to hear, for once, "Emily, that's really important, you're doing great." But those words were never spoken. Their indifference gradually changed me from the inside. I learned to make myself quieter, as if taking up less space in the world. Over time, I became a master at guessing others' needs, completely forgetting my own. In any group, I was the one who would listen, support, remember a birthday, and send a card with kind words, even if no one remembered my own celebrations. After college in Boston, I got a job as a graphic designer at a marketing agency. It was a stable position with a decent salary, but for my family, things looked different. My father considered only law, medicine, or finance to be real careers, and everything else he dismissed as a hobby. "So when are you going to get a serious profession?" He would ask at the family dinner table, not even waiting for an answer. And then he would invariably turn the conversation to Daniel, discussing his latest promotion at the law firm, where my brother had followed in his footsteps. My 24th birthday passed unnoticed. No one even sent a short message. I spent the evening alone. In front of me was a cupcake from the supermarket with a single candle, and my only wish was for someone to finally remember me. The next day, my mom called. She talked about Ethan's upcoming volleyball match, and after finishing the conversation, she never once mentioned that it had been my birthday the day before. When I finally landed a major client and a significant bonus at work, my first thought was to share the joy with my parents. I called home, but my mom listened for no more than 30 seconds and immediately cut me off. "That's very nice, dear, but I have to go. we're picking out a tuxedo for Daniel's wedding. And so it went, year after year. My victories were like footnotes, my struggles went unnoticed, and my very existence felt like a postscript to other people's stories. At family gatherings, conversations flowed around me as if I were just an empty space at the table. Questions about my life were asked more for the sake of formality, and my answers were either interrupted or forgotten before I could even finish. Even my apartment, which I had furnished with love and decorated with my own paintings, was never visited by any family members, even though they lived only a 20-minute drive away. Every time I invited them for dinner, everyone had an excuse. Dad had another case, Mom had a committee meeting, Daniel had endless worries with his wife and newborn child, and Ethan had volleyball practice. Over time, loneliness became my familiar backdrop. I taught myself not to expect recognition and lowered my expectations to almost zero. I convinced myself that maybe this is just how families are, someone always remains on the sidelines, and that's normal. But deep down, in a place in my soul I rarely allowed myself to visit, I knew the truth: it shouldn't be this way. I felt I deserved more than the role of a shadow in my own home, more than a perpetual silent presence between the bright pages of others' stories. This thought was like a small seed planted in the darkness. All that was left was to wait for the moment when it could sprout and grow into something more. The moment when everything turned upside down was surprisingly ordinary. There was even a certain poetry to it. It happened at our annual family barbecue, which my mom organized on August 8th with the same meticulousness as if she were rehearsing a ceremony. The yard was transformed into a small festive stage, garlands with flags hung along the fence, neatly arranged folding chairs stood on the lawn, and a long wooden table was covered with a festive tablecloth in national colors. The aroma of spices and smoke rose from the grill, promising perfectly cooked meat. And on a separate shelf, plates and glasses that my mom only brought out once a year gleamed. The day when everything turned upside down looked surprisingly ordinary. It happened at our traditional family barbecue on August 8th, which my mom organized every year with her characteristic scrupulousness. The backyard was decorated with bright garlands and ribbons, paper lanterns hung from the trees, and neatly arranged chairs stood on the lawn. The smell of grilled meat and spices filled the air, and a long table under the awning shone with festive dishes that were brought out only once a year. Everyone was there. My father and mother sat side by side, discussing the organization of the party. Daniel came with his wife, Megan, and their young son. Ethan brought Sarah, whom he had been dating since high school and, by all appearances, was planning to propose to. And I placed a large bowl of macaroni salad on the table, made from my grandmother's recipe, and was proud that the dish turned out exactly as intended. "Very tasty," noted a colleague of my father's, coming back for a second helping. I smiled and thanked him, feeling a slight satisfaction that my efforts had been noticed. "Oh, it's store-bought," my mom interjected, even though she had seen me preparing everything that morning in her kitchen. "Emily isn't much of a cook," she added as if in passing. These words stung, but they were just another reminder of the usual attitude. What followed was even harder. For 3 hours, the conversations revolved around everyone else but me. Daniel talked about his new promotion at work. Ethan proudly shared the news that he had been invited to a semi-professional volleyball team. My parents enthusiastically described their recent vacation in Florida, reminiscing about the beaches and sunny weather. When Megan mentioned she was thinking of going back to work at least part-time, everyone present started discussing it. And then there was a pause, that very moment when someone could have asked, "Emily, what's new with you?" But my mom broke the silence only to announce that it was time for dessert. That day, something inside me seemed to snap. I looked at the faces of my family, the people who were supposed to be my closest circle, and suddenly realized with terrifying clarity, waiting for change was pointless. For them, I would always be an inconspicuous figure, a background character in other people's stories. And then, for the first time, a bold thought flashed through my mind. What if I just packed up and left, far away? This idea didn't disappear, on the contrary, it grew, strengthened, and soon began to seem like the only way out. I started looking for jobs in other cities, far enough from Boston that a visit would be a serious matter, not a momentary whim. Denver particularly caught my eye. A city in the heart of the country with a mountainous atmosphere, a growing art scene, and tech companies where my design education could be a real advantage. Secretly, in the evenings and during my lunch breaks, I sent out my resume and attached my portfolio, hoping for a response. Gradually, my life turned into a carefully planned schedule. I had online interviews, took days off for in-person meetings. A few months later, I received a job offer from a small agency that valued fresh ideas and a creative approach, and the salary was significantly higher than before. At the same time, I was looking at different neighborhoods in the city and fell in love with a compact apartment not far from the center, with windows overlooking the mountain horizon. I realized that this was the place where something new could begin. I contacted movers, sorted through boxes of my belongings, deciding what to take and what to leave in the past. I closed my old bank accounts and opened new ones in Denver. I even found a specialist in dealing with family trauma and made an appointment for my first week after the move. And so, gradually, I was building a bridge to a new life, step by step, without much noise, but with an inner feeling that I was finally going where I had always wanted to go. I still went to family dinners, where at the table they discussed Daniel's career and Ethan's sports achievements, and I sat there, nodding and smiling, as if this role had always been meant for me. No one noticed that something had changed in me. Instead of submissiveness, a quiet firmness had appeared, and sparks flashed in my eyes when I talked about my plans for the future. On the day I left, I packed the last boxes into my car, lingered for a moment at the door of my apartment, which had been my home for 7 years, and closed it behind me. I left a short note for my parents on the kitchen table. I've left to start over. I'll call when I'm settled. Love, Emily. There was no address, no extra details, just an assurance that I was okay. The move to Denver took 3 days. It was 3 days of long highways, roadside motels, simple diners, and endless playlists with songs about freedom and new horizons. With every mile, I felt both lighter and more anxious. Questions swirled in my head. Am I making a mistake? Will they worry about me? And will they even notice that I'm gone? I drove into Denver in the middle of the week, when the sky was covered with a light rain. The city seemed to welcome me with a soft curtain of drops, like a quiet greeting. The new apartment was modest in size, but surprisingly bright even on a cloudy day. The worn wooden floor creaked softly, and the distant view of the mountains and city lights made me breathe deeper than I had been able to in years. The first night, I sat on the still unfurnished mattress, eating noodles from a local Thai cafe and waiting for my phone to light up with calls and messages. It seemed obvious to me. My parents had found my note, so someone must be worried about where I had disappeared. But the phone screen remained dark. Days passed. A week. 2. Silence. I gradually unpacked my boxes, settled into my new job, and started exploring the city. I discovered a small coffee shop with the aroma of fresh pastries, a cozy bookstore with a friendly cat, and a farmer's market that was open on Sundays. I bought a couple of plants, and on the balcony, I set up boxes with herbs. I met my neighbors, signed up for local drawing classes. And my phone remained silent. Not a single question, not a single email, not the slightest hint of concern. This silence both confirmed my suspicions and left a void inside me. I was right, they didn't notice me even after I was gone. By the end of the first month, I had stopped waiting for calls. 2 months later, I caught myself thinking that most of the time, I didn't even think about my phone. By the 3rd month, I was already building a new life. A life where I was the main character. People called me by name, the barista remembered my order, people asked how my weekend went. And by the 6th month, I had almost convinced myself that I was okay with the fact that my family had never noticed my disappearance. Denver welcomed me in a way my own family never could. My apartment quickly became a personal sanctuary, filled with my paintings and things I found in small antique shops nearby. In the mornings, sunlight streamed through the east-facing windows, illuminating a cozy corner with a small table where I usually started my day with a cup of coffee and quick sketches in a notebook. From the tiny balcony on a clear day, I could see the mountains and the city lights, reminding me how far I had come from my past and how many new roads now lay before me. My neighborhood was alive with creativity. On the street corners, musicians played guitars and saxophones, bright graffiti decorated the brick walls, and small galleries showcased the work of young artists. On weekends, I often walked these streets, soaking in the atmosphere, so different from the cold and strict environment in which I had grown up. The company where I worked, Aurora Design Studio, was located on the top floor of an old warehouse converted into a modern office. Tall windows filled the space with light, and green plants stood in literally every corner. Unlike my previous job, where I executed others' ideas, here I was encouraged to propose my own solutions. "We hired you for your unique perspective," Emily, my manager, Carol, told me in my first week. "Don't be shy about sharing it." For someone who had been seemingly unnoticed their whole life, these words sounded like a real revelation. At meetings, my colleagues listened attentively to what I had to say. My proposals weren't just recorded in the minutes, they were actually implemented. Projects were assigned based on who had the strongest vision, not on seniority or the ability to play office politics. At Aurora Design Studio, I met Lauren, a copywriter whose desk was across from mine. With her chestnut hair tied up in a messy bun and her habit of wearing vintage brooches, she stood out, yet looked harmonious in her own way. On my very first day, she invited me to lunch, and by the time we finished dessert, we were laughing as if we had been friends for years. One day, sitting in our favorite Asian cafe over a bowl of ramen, Lauren suddenly said, "You act as if you're surprised when people pay attention to you." I almost dropped my chopsticks. "Is it really that obvious?" I asked, embarrassed. "It's only visible to those who have been through it themselves," she replied with a soft smile. "Family stories," she added briefly, not demanding an explanation. I nodded and thanked her for not insisting. It was precisely this respect for my boundaries that made her especially dear to me. Through Lauren, I soon found myself in her circle of friends, artists, programmers, teachers. They organized pub quizzes, went on hikes, and sometimes got together for no reason, just to chat. For the first time in my life, I was building relationships where there were no old roles and no pressure from my family. And then Tom came into my life, a middle-aged neighbor, an architect, who lived on the floor above. We met when I accidentally locked myself out, leaving my keys inside, and he helped me contact the building manager. Later, he started showing me the city in his own way. He took me to unusual cafes, exhibitions, and quiet corners of Denver that only the locals knew about. "You have the look of someone who has always sought depth," he said one day, as we sat on the roof of his building, looking at the city lights. "And only now are you allowing that side of yourself to emerge." Through Tom, I learned about an art collective that met once a month in a former warehouse. There, I picked up brushes again, for the first time since college. No one questioned how talented anyone was, everyone just shared their creativity. And I felt a rare sense of relief. I could paint for myself, not for someone else's approval. As winter gradually gave way to spring, I noticed that I was rediscovering the joys I had once given up on. I took cooking classes at a small studio, and there I learned to bake fresh bread and make a light minestrone soup. Instead of yoga, I signed up for a swimming pool near my home and once again felt the pleasure of swimming. Each session made me stronger, helped me concentrate, and gave me a sense of inner balance. But the biggest change was that I decided to start therapy. My therapist turned out to be Dr. Miller, an attentive, warm woman in her 50s. She helped me understand how my family relationships had shaped my perception of myself. At one of our meetings, she said, "From childhood, you were given responsibilities that didn't belong to you. You learned to be independent, but at the same time, you remained invisible. And that's why it became normal for me to feel forgotten." I clarified. "We perceive as normal what we grow up with," she nodded calmly. "But that doesn't make it healthy." Week after week, I unpacked years of silent neglect. I learned to see recurring patterns, to name what I had previously hidden, and to acknowledge my feelings without waiting for external validation. It was painful, but necessary, like setting a bone correctly so it can heal. The changes also became apparent externally. Colleagues started saying that I had become more confident. My manager noticed that I was increasingly proposing bold ideas. Friends remarked that I had become more sincere in my interactions and less likely to apologize for just existing and taking up space. My first official performance review coincided almost to the day with the 6-month anniversary of my move. I was sitting in the conference room, and my portfolio was on the table in front of me. Carol, my supervisor, was carefully flipping through the pages with the projects I had been working on for the past few months. "Emily, your results over the past 6 months are impressive," she said, stopping at the section with the branding for Cascade Valley Brewing. "This project particularly highlights your growth." The client is thrilled. I felt a sense of pride wash over me, a rare and warm feeling. "Thank you. That means a lot to me," I replied. Carol looked up and added, "We want to promote you to the position of senior designer, with a corresponding salary increase. Your unconventional perspective and ability to work in a team are exactly what we value at Aurora Design Studio." At that moment, I could barely hold back the tears that welled up. "I gladly accept. Thank you for seeing my potential." That evening, I met up with Lauren and a few of our friends. We gathered at a rooftop bar with a view of the entire city. As the sun set behind the horizon and the sky was painted in shades of gold and pink, I suddenly realized I had managed to build what I had always dreamed of, a life where I am valued, where my presence matters, and where my voice is truly heard. The next morning, an email from the art collective was waiting for me in my inbox. It said that one of my paintings had been selected for their upcoming exhibition, my first public showing since college. I reread the confirmation lines several times, not believing my eyes, and then felt a smile spread across my face. This is what it feels like to be noticed. This is what it feels like when your work has value. This is what it feels like to finally build a life on your own terms. And it was at that very moment that my phone rang. The screen displayed a number I hadn't seen in 6 months. It was my father calling. It was a Saturday. I had just returned home from my morning swim and was settling down on my tiny balcony with warm oatmeal with almond milk and pear slices, a mug of herbal tea beside me. The spring breeze carried the sweet scent of blooming cherry trees from the park across the street. My sketchbook lay open nearby, the pages filled with ideas from my exhibition. The phone vibrated, and my father's name popped up on the screen. I nearly spilled my tea. For a moment, I wanted to ignore it. 6 months of silence, and then a call as if nothing had happened. Curiosity won out. I took a deep breath and swiped my finger across the screen. "Hello," I said, surprised at how foreign and high-pitched my voice sounded. "Emily, it's your father," the same authoritative tone, the same impatient note, as if I could have forgotten who he was in 6 months. "There's news." "No, how are you?" "No, we were worried, not a word about my disappearance. Your brother Ethan is marrying Sarah on May 11th. Mark the date." I gripped my tea mug tighter, its warmth a sharp contrast to how cold my fingers had become. 6 months of complete silence, and the only reason my father was calling was for a date on the calendar. "I'm in Denver now," I said, testing the waters to see if he would react with surprise or at least concern. A pause hung on the line, short but palpable. "In Denver? Since when?" "For 6 months now." "I left you a note," I reminded him. Another pause, this time even shorter. "Well, that explains why we haven't seen you at family dinners. Your mother thought you were just swamped with work." For 6 months, they hadn't noticed my absence at their weekly dinner table. And in all that time, it never occurred to anyone to ask what was wrong with me, to check if I was alive, if everything was okay. They just concluded I was busy, and left it at that. "Anyway," he continued, in a tone that suggested my story about moving was just a minor detail not worth attention. "The wedding will be at the Silver Heights Hotel. Everything will be exquisite. The Hendersons have invited half the city. We need our family to look dignified." I closed my eyes, feeling a familiar heavy tension rising in my chest. To look dignified. You know what I'm talking about. Sarah's family is very influential in Boston. Your mother has already discussed their dresses with Megan. You'll have to find an outfit in the same shade. As I recall, it was dark blue. I'll ask her to send you a fabric swatch. And then the full absurdity of the situation hit me. 6 months without a single call or letter, and now they expect me to go to Boston, wear the right dress, and pose for family photos. As if I had always been a beloved daughter and sister, and not a shadow they only remembered when the picture needed to look perfect. I don't think I can make it, I said, surprised myself by the firmness in my voice. What do you mean, you can't make it? Of course, you can. It's your brother's wedding, he snapped. I have things to do here. Work, an exhibition at the gallery. It would be difficult to get away. In response, I heard his short, scornful laugh. An exhibition, Emily. Are you serious? This is family. This is what matters. And your little art show can wait. Little art show. Those words cut deep, but they were what gave me determination. This was why I had left, because of the endless belittling of everything that was important to me. It's not a hobby, Dad. It's my profession. My work will be featured in a real gallery. Listen carefully, his voice became cold and categorical, the same tone he used to dominate in the courtroom. A wedding like this happens once. Your mother has already told everyone you'll be there. The family photos are planned. Ethan and Sarah are counting on you. I highly doubted that my brother and his fiancée had even given me a moment's thought, but I didn't say that out loud. I'm sorry, but I won't be coming, I said, and the words sounded firm, like never before. The ensuing silence was not empty, but tense, filled with a familiar premonition, the same as in childhood, when everything froze before a flash of my father's anger. Emily Maria Harper, he finally said, clearly articulating each word. I don't understand what this whim is, moving across the country without telling us anything, turning your back on your family and its duties. But this ends here and now. You will be at the wedding. You will wear the dress your mother picks out. You will smile for the photos and behave as you should. A year ago, even 6 months ago, those words would have crushed me. I would have submitted, bought a ticket, come, put on the pink dress, played the part of a happy daughter, and returned to Denver with the same feeling of emptiness. But now everything had changed. No, Dad. I won't be coming, I said calmly but firmly. What did you say? I said no. I won't be there. A sharpness cut through his voice, which he usually concealed, priding himself on his self-control. This is not up for discussion, Emily. This is family. This is your brother's wedding. You have a duty. I couldn't help but laugh, and even to myself, my laughter sounded bitter. A duty? What duty could I possibly have to people who didn't even notice I had moved to another city for half a year? He was taken aback, but not for long. Don't exaggerate, he said dryly. We've had a lot going on. Daniel's firm is expanding, Ethan is preparing for the wedding, and your mother is now on 3 charitable organizations. And I, by the way, have been building a life where I am truly seen, I replied. A life that I am not going to put on hold for a family that only remembers I exist when I'm needed as a decoration for their beautiful picture. His tone turned icy. I recognized the same cold strategy he used in court. If this is all about getting attention, Emily, then you've chosen a strange way to do it. This isn't about attention, Dad, I said calmly. It's about respect. Primarily, self-respect, which I've finally found after years of being treated as if I didn't exist. I will not tolerate this tone, he snapped. If you continue in this vein, there will be consequences. This is pure selfishness. I chuckled, but the laughter sounded bitter. Consequences? And what would those be? You'll stop calling me? Stop asking how I'm doing? Stop remembering that I exist? But isn't that what's already been happening all these years? His next remark was calculated to hurt. The consequences will be financial, he said. Your trust fund, your inheritance. If you're distancing yourself from the family, perhaps you shouldn't count on its support either. Money. Of course, it all came down to this again. It was always his primary tool of pressure, his measure of value and affection. But I had never used those funds. I had built my life in Denver entirely on my own earnings. His words revealed more than he probably intended. Fine, I replied calmly. If that's how it is, so be it. I'd rather keep my self-respect than depend on someone else's money. You're making a big mistake, he said with emphasis. Think carefully about what you're giving up. I remembered all those years when I felt like I didn't exist. My achievements went unnoticed, my efforts unrecognized. I remembered the 6 months of silence that would surely have continued if not for the wedding and conversations about matching outfits. You didn't even notice I was gone for 6 months, I said evenly, without hesitation. I don't think my absence at the wedding will change anything. After these words, there was silence. I could almost picture him at his massive desk, in his chair, usually so confident, but now restraining his irritation. For a man like Robert Harper, being at a loss for words was a rarity. When he finally spoke, his voice was muffled. Your mother will be very upset. The conversation ended abruptly, without a formal goodbye. I remained sitting on my balcony with the phone in my hand. My heart was pounding, but my thoughts were surprisingly clear. I had just done something I had never dared to do before. I had openly disagreed with my father, set my boundaries, and stopped being the convenient daughter who could be summoned at any moment and just as easily ignored. I expected to be overwhelmed by guilt or anxiety. But instead, a feeling of lightness came over me, as if I had shed a burden I had been carrying on my shoulders for years. I took out my sketchbook and began to draw lines. The pencils glided smoothly over the paper, transforming into an image of a tree with strong roots and a spreading crown, illuminated by the first rays of the sun. I named this work Rooted. The consequences of our conversation with my father were not long in coming. Just a few hours later, my phone literally came to life, one notification after another. Messages, voicemails, emails, and even tags on social media that I rarely used. After 6 months of silence, it seemed that my entire family had suddenly remembered how to contact me easily. My mom was the first to respond. Her voicemail sounded as if she were both hurt and indignant. Emily, I just spoke with your father. I can't believe you're going to do this to Ethan and Sarah. After everything we've done for you, you're responding with a refusal and jeopardizing your brother's special day. Call me back immediately, we need to discuss the dress. After everything they've done for me. I replayed the message twice, wondering if we had been living in the same reality at all. And this focus on the dress seemed almost absurd when the issue was something else entirely, the fact that I had moved to another city, and no one had noticed. Then came a series of messages from Daniel, the eternal peacemaker, who always tried to smooth over disputes without addressing their root cause. Hey, sis. Heard you're in Denver now, cool. And also, that you're not coming to Ethan's wedding. Dad is really upset. Mom is worried. Maybe you'll come after all? It's just one weekend. I looked at the screen, and a familiar heavy feeling washed over me again. Just one weekend. But for me, it would have been a weekend of pretending that we were a close and caring family. A weekend where I would smile for photos while my words and feelings remained invisible. A weekend where I would have had to give up my boundaries and self-respect, which I had fought so hard to gain. I wrote to James. For you, it might just be a weekend. For me, it's a whole life where I was in the background, until I was needed for a family photo. I'm sorry that Mom is upset, but I'm building my own life here. His reply came quickly. You're making it all up, Emily. No one ever made you invisible. We were always there for you. Those words hurt, though they weren't unexpected. James always preferred not to see the real picture. His role as the favorite son protected him from what I had to endure. I wrote back to him. When was the last time you called me before today? 3 blinking dots appeared and disappeared several times on the screen before a short reply came. Everyone's been busy. That doesn't mean we didn't care. Busy, so busy that for 6 months, no one noticed I had moved to another city. So busy that no call, no letter followed. But as soon as a wedding appeared on the horizon, I suddenly became a necessary part of their perfect scenario. The next message came from Ethan. He wrote in all caps and used plenty of exclamation marks. Are you serious, Emily? Skipping my wedding because of your problems? This is the most important day of my life, and you're making it all about you. I hadn't spoken to him for over a year, even before I moved. He had never been to my apartment, never asked about my work, never inquired about my life. But now, my absence suddenly became a threat to his celebration, not because my support was important to him, but because I didn't fit into the picture. And before I could reply, a new message arrived, this time from Sarah. Her words were more measured. Emily, I know we're not that close, but it would be especially important to me if the whole family could be together on our day. Everyone is expecting your mom's daughters to be in matching dresses. Please don't make things complicated. This wedding is my dream. In her message, I wasn't Ethan's sister, but just part of the family image. She was worried not about my absence as a person, but about the potential awkwardness in the photos and how it might affect the appearance of her celebration. As the hours passed, the messages from my family became more and more insistent. My father sent a long email listing what I could lose if I continued to be stubborn. My mother left another voicemail. She said she would be embarrassed to face her friends if I didn't show up at the wedding. From Ethan came a link to an expensive gift from their wish list, which, in their opinion, I was supposed to buy. Each of these messages revealed the same truth I had previously turned away from. I was valued not for who I was, but for the role I could play in their scenario of a perfect family. Not for my opinion or feelings, but for checking a box on their list of what should be right. And only one message stood out amidst all this pressure. It came from my Aunt Diana, my mom's younger sister, who herself had always felt a bit like an outsider in our family. Emily, it's Aunt Diana. I heard you moved to Denver. I'm proud of you, dear. I always thought you needed your own space to breathe and grow. And yes, Mom told me about Ethan's wedding and that you've decided not to come. I'm sure you have your reasons, and they deserve respect. I wanted you to know, whatever you choose, I support you. And I'd be very happy to hear how you've settled in there. My number is the same. As I read her words, my eyes stung. Finally, someone in the family saw the real me, without conditions or demands, just accepting my decisions as having weight. I replied immediately. Thank you, Aunt Diana. Your words mean so much to me. I'd be happy to talk with you soon. By evening, I felt completely drained. Lauren dropped by with a pizza box and a bottle of wine. We settled on my small balcony, and I showed her a few messages. Wow, she said, her eyes widening as she read the all-caps message. They really don't understand how this sounds, do they? They never did, I sighed, taking a big sip. To them, I'm stubborn because I'm not ready to drop everything for someone else's role. And I'm considered ungrateful just because I'm standing up for my boundaries. Lauren leaned forward, her face serious. Emily, listen. What they're doing is called invalidation. They're trying to make you doubt what you feel and your right to make decisions about your own life. Don't let them do that. I'm trying, I admitted. But there's still a voice inside me saying, maybe I am only thinking of myself. Maybe I should just go to avoid a fight. And will that trip bring you peace? She asked quietly. Her question hit me harder than any argument. Would I find peace by returning to a place where there was never any room for me? To people for whom I only mattered for what I could do for them, not for who I am. To the familiar scenarios that I had traveled so far to escape. No, I said, almost in a whisper. It won't. Then you already have your answer, Lauren said, squeezing my hand tightly. Your peace matters. You matter. That night, I turned off my phone and slept more soundly than I had in many previous days. I woke up in the morning with a clear head and a sense of firm resolve. I composed calm but clear responses to each family member, setting my boundaries without excuses or lengthy explanations. To my mother, I wrote. I'm sorry you're upset, but I won't be able to come to the wedding. My life and my commitments in Denver are important to me. I hope you will accept my decision. To my brother Daniel. I appreciate your efforts to keep the peace, but this is not a simple misunderstanding. This is the result of long years of feeling invisible. Right now, I need to prioritize my own well-being. To Ethan. I sincerely wish you and Sarah happiness, but I will not be at your wedding. This is not about making your day about me. It's about finally putting my life at the center of my own story. And to my father, I wrote nothing. His hints about consequences needed no comment. I thought that would be the end of it, that they would likely label me as difficult and inconvenient, and perhaps talk about me behind my back at the wedding, and then continue living their lives as they had before, when I was physically present but emotionally absent. I was wrong. A few days later, as I was about to leave work, my Aunt Diana called. Her voice sounded agitated. Emily, I wanted to warn you. Tomorrow your parents and Ethan are planning to come to Denver. James shared your address. He had it saved in case of an emergency. They want to talk to you about the wedding. I felt a knot form in my stomach. They're planning to come straight to my home? Yes, she replied. I tried to talk them out of it, but your father is very serious. He's convinced that this conversation needs to happen in person. I thanked my aunt for the warning and immediately called Lauren. They can't just come and insist on their way, I said, pacing around my apartment. That's exactly why I decided to leave Boston, to live by my own rules. And that's your right, Lauren replied calmly. This is your home, your territory. Here, you're the one who sets the boundaries. Lauren was right. This wasn't my parents' house, where I always felt like an outsider. Here, in Denver, was my space, my own corner that I had created for myself. And if my family decided to come, they would see a different Emily, one who had learned to speak up, to defend her boundaries, and to value herself over these months. That evening, I mentally prepared for the conversation, rehearsing possible lines in my head, learning to stay calm and firm. Miller had taught me simple techniques, how to stay centered in difficult conversations and not fall back into old, painful patterns. Remember, she had said at our last meeting, you can't control how others react. But you can choose how you respond. I repeated these words to myself over and over, like a reminder. And only after that did I allow myself to fall asleep, knowing that a day lay ahead that would require inner strength. On Wednesday afternoon, they appeared without warning. I had just returned from a meeting with the gallery curator, where we were discussing my upcoming exhibition, and as I entered the lobby of my building, I saw them. My father, in his usual strict gray suit. My mother was holding her handbag with both hands, as if it were her shield. And Ethan looked a bit stiff in his business attire, which clearly didn't match his usual athletic style. My first impulse was to turn around and leave, to avoid the conversation. But I took a deep breath and reminded myself of Dr. Miller's words, stay centered, hold your ground, and don't abandon your truth. Emily, my father's loud voice boomed, echoing through the lobby and attracting the security guard's attention. So, we meet at last. I slowly approached, feeling my heart beat faster than usual. You could have called and warned me you were coming, I remarked calmly. And would you have answered? My mother asked, a slight reproach in her tone. Yes, I replied simply. I always answer my phone. Something like doubt, perhaps even a hint of shame, flickered across her face before she regained her usual composed expression. Can we talk in private? My father said, more as a statement than a question. I nodded and led them to the elevator. We went up in complete silence, the small space seemingly filled with tension. I felt Ethan's gaze on me, as if he were noticing every detail, a more confident posture, brighter clothes, even a small blue streak in my hair that I had decided to get after a conversation with Lauren. When we entered the apartment, I saw them looking around, the paintings on the walls, mostly mine, the green plants on the windowsills, the open sketchbooks and design materials. All of it spoke of a life full of ideas and projects. Cozy place, Ethan said, finally breaking the silence. Those were his first words. Thank you, I replied, noting the small gesture to myself. Emily, this has gone too far, my father began, in a tone that sounded like an order. We flew here to put an end to this argument. Today, you are returning with us to Boston. A dress fitting is scheduled for tomorrow morning, and your mother has already told everyone you will be at the wedding. Not a single question about how I was living, why I had moved, what was wrong with me. 6 months of silence, and now, only demands. I'm not going, I said, surprised by my own calmness. And I won't be at the wedding. I've already explained why. What reasons? My mother interjected. You just said you had work. Since when is work more important than family? It's not about work, I replied, perching on the edge of the sofa. It's about the fact that I moved to another city 6 months ago, and no one even noticed. It's about the years I felt invisible in this family, unless I was needed to play some role. That's absurd, my father waved his hand. No one made you invisible. It was your choice, to leave and not tell anyone. I left a note, I reminded him. And I left because every time I tried to be heard or acknowledged, I was simply pushed away. Ethan stepped forward, his irritation evident. So, you decided to ruin my wedding because of your grudges? Because you always felt left out? This isn't about grudges, I replied, looking straight at him. This is about me, for the first time in my life, putting my own well-being first, instead of endlessly trying to earn attention and recognition. Recognition? My mother repeated, her voice trembling. How can you say we didn't appreciate you? We paid for your college, helped with a car, you had a trust fund. What more could you want? And that was the real difference between us. For them, care was measured in gifts, tuition payments, and financial support. For me, what had always been valuable were attention, recognition, and simple involvement in my life. I dreamed of you coming to my college graduation, I said quietly. I graduated at the top of my class, but none of you showed up. Daniel had a game that day. That was too long ago to remember, my father cut in, as if dismissing the topic. I wanted someone to acknowledge my student exhibition, where I won first place. But then all the attention was on Ethan, who had been accepted into the team. I had a lot of matches back then, my brother muttered awkwardly, clearly feeling out of place. I waited for someone to at least once visit my apartment in Denver, after all, you lived so close. For someone to wish me a happy birthday, to ask about my work, to notice that I had moved to another city. With each new memory, my voice grew more confident. Years of accumulated silence were finally finding an outlet. Silence fell. My mother looked down, her eyes glistening. It was hard to tell if it was from regret or resentment. My father's face remained impassive, as if he were back in his familiar work persona. Ethan stood without looking up, shifting from foot to foot. Everyone was busy, my mother said, barely audible. Daniel with work, Ethan with his career and wedding preparations. Your father had an important case, I had my committees. But were you so busy that you couldn't write a few lines in 6 months? I asked. So busy that you didn't notice I had stopped coming to dinner? That I had simply disappeared from your circle? Enough, my father interrupted, his voice growing harsher. We didn't come here to listen to old grievances. We came for you to go home and attend your brother's wedding. And so it will be. He took a step forward, using his height and mannerisms that had always intimidated me as a child. But now I stood firm and was not going to back down. I'm already home, I said firmly. This is my home. Here, there are people who see me and value me, people who would notice my absence, even for just a day, not after months. My father chuckled and spread his hands, gesturing around my apartment. What people? Look around. You're alone, Emily. No family, no traditions, just a job and walls covered with your drawings. His dismissive tone towards my work and my life triggered a response in me that I had suppressed for too long. I am not alone, I replied, and for the first time, my voice grew louder. Here I have friends who in these 6 months have shown me more genuine care than I have ever received from my family. I have colleagues who respect my work and acknowledge my contribution. I have a mentor who helps me understand that what happened in our family was neither healthy nor fair. I took a deep breath. The words I had held inside for so long finally came out. Do you have any idea what it's like to grow up in the shadows? When your successes go unnoticed, your needs are ignored, and your attempts to connect are cut short? Do you understand what it does to a child to feel secondary in their own family for years? A flood of memories poured out of me, as if a dam had broken. Birthdays when no one bothered to find out what kind of cake I liked. School concerts and competitions where there wasn't a single familiar face from my family in the audience. In college, I spent several days in the hospital with a serious illness, and it was only my roommate who managed to get through to my parents because my calls went unanswered. For my graduation, the gifts were chosen hastily, without thought, while my brothers always received things with personal meaning. In family photos, I was placed on the side, as if my role was to be on the periphery. I was piecing together the puzzle of my entire life, and the picture was all too clear. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but my voice remained calm. And for the first time, I didn't try to hide my emotions or apologize for them. My mother sank onto the sofa, her face pale. Ethan leaned against the wall, stunned by my words. Only my father remained coldly composed, his jaw set in a stubborn line that I knew from childhood. "So that's what this is all about," he said, when I finally paused. "You're just jealous of your brothers. That's why you're blowing this out of proportion, why you left, why you refused to come to the wedding. This is all just an attempt to get attention." I opened my mouth to reply, but at that moment, there was a knock on the door, and then the sound of a key turning in the lock. Lauren walked in with a bag of pizza and froze for a second, seeing what was happening. "Oh," she said, quickly glancing around the room. "I didn't know you weren't alone." "This is a family matter," my father said sharply. Lauren raised her eyebrows but didn't take a step back. Instead, she came closer and stood beside me. Her confident presence felt like support. "Lauren," she introduced herself, not making a move to shake hands. "Emily's friend. The one who would have noticed her absence after at least a few days, not after months." My father didn't like her words, his face hardened. "This is not your business." "On the contrary," Lauren replied calmly. "Emily is my close friend. Her well-being is important to me. And right now, in her apartment, there are people who for a long time showed no interest in her, and now they are demanding something from her that goes against her wishes. So yes, this directly concerns me too." The atmosphere in the room tangibly changed. With Lauren's appearance, I no longer felt like I was facing my family's pressure alone. The balance of power had shifted. "I've created a life where I am respected and accepted," I said firmly and clearly. "And I'm not going back to a state where I was unnoticed." "This isn't about you not being noticed," my father insisted. "This is about family duty. About supporting your brother on his most important day." "Family duty should be mutual," I replied. "Where was your support all these years? Where was your care when I needed recognition and warmth?" "We always loved you," my mother whispered, and her voice trembled. "We always wanted the best for you." "The best for me is not being a backdrop in someone else's photo," I said firmly. "The best is being respected as an individual, with my own decisions, my own life, and my own boundaries. And my boundary right now is simple: I will not go to the wedding." The finality in my voice seemed to register with them for the first time. My father's face flushed, but this time he was at a loss for words. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue. And Ethan suddenly came to life and stepped forward. "So all of this is to get attention? Stop acting childish, Emily. The world isn't fair. Not everyone can be the center of attention." "I never wanted to be the center," I replied quietly. "I just wanted to be part of the whole picture." My words sounded so clear that to refute them would be to admit the very essence of our family's disharmony. My father was the first to speak, his voice dry and official. "I see. You've made your choice. But don't expect special treatment in the future." He turned and nodded for my mother and Ethan to follow him. My mother hesitated, casting a look at me filled with mixed emotions. Whether it was regret or confusion that the situation had spun out of her control, I couldn't tell. "Emily," she began, but the words never came. "I love you, Mom," I said softly. "I always have. That's why all of this hurts so much." She nodded, tears running down her cheeks, and, lowering her head, followed my father. Ethan lingered at the doorway. His face showed an internal struggle. "To be honest," he said awkwardly, "I didn't know about that exhibition in college. No one told me about it." "That's the point, Ethan," I replied calmly. "For them, it wasn't significant enough to even mention." He nodded slightly, and for a moment, understanding flickered in his eyes. "Take care, Emily." And then the door closed, a soft click that sounded louder to me than any slam. Lauren came closer and put her arm around my shoulder. "Are you holding up?" I took a deep breath, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from my soul. "Not right now," I admitted honestly. "But I will be." The days following my family's visit were some of the hardest since I had moved to Denver. I knew I had stood up for myself and done what was necessary for my inner well-being. But in the quiet moments, when my thoughts weren't occupied with tasks, doubts crept in. What if I sounded too harsh? What if my firmness completely shut the door on any possibility of future reconciliation? At night, I slept poorly, tossing and turning, replaying conversations in my head over and over. During the day, I found it hard to concentrate on projects, catching myself making small mistakes that I rarely made before. Carol corrected them calmly, but I acutely felt that I had lost my previous confidence. My appetite disappeared, and even the sunny spring in Denver, which had recently inspired me, now seemed as if seen through glass, dull and distant against the backdrop of fatigue. Lauren noticed it right away. She started dropping by more often, sometimes with dinner, sometimes with a suggestion to take an evening walk along the river. One day, Tom knocked on the door, holding an Ella Fitzgerald record, and said that good jazz could lift one's spirits better than any words. And my sessions with Dr. Miller became more frequent, twice a week. We broke down step by step everything that confrontation had brought, and I learned to let go of the accumulated emotions. Family habits run very deep, Dr. Miller reminded me at one of our particularly difficult sessions. You've changed the script by which your whole family has lived for years. And it's natural for that to cause resistance, not just from your loved ones, but from within yourself. After all, what is familiar, no matter what it is, often seems safe. I sat across from her, twisting a napkin in my hands. I keep thinking, maybe it's easier to just agree? Go to the wedding, wear the dress, smile for the photos, and not create tension. And at what cost? She asked gently. At the cost of my self-respect, I admitted. And everything I've already managed to build here. The recovery process always comes in waves, Dr. Miller said. There will be moments when doubts roll in, and old patterns of behavior pull you back. But that doesn't mean your choice, to set boundaries, is a mistake. I often remembered these words during long nights when my strength left me and the desire to give up appeared. I reminded myself of the 6 months of silence. Of the years when I was not noticed. Of the fact that my presence at the wedding was expected as an obligation, not a desire. And I reminded myself that in Denver, I was building something important. A life in which I matter. Where my participation is valued. Where my absence would be noticed. Some time after my family's visit, I found an envelope in my mailbox with a Boston postmark, but no return address. Inside was a long letter, 5 pages of my Aunt Diana's neat, precise handwriting. Dear Emily, it began. Your mother called me after her trip to Denver. She was upset, confused, and, I think, starting to think about some things she had preferred not to talk about before. For many years, I watched as you tried to find your place in a family that seemed determined not to see you. It broke my heart, but I didn't say the words then that I should have. Tears welled up in my eyes as I continued to read. My aunt shared her own memories, how she herself had felt like an outsider in her youth, how her choice to dedicate herself to teaching, rather than marriage and children, was seen as strange. She was often considered different and therefore not taken seriously. Not everyone can decide to do this, my aunt wrote. To bravely leave, to build your own life, and not to let yourself be pulled back into old patterns. I want you to know, I have always noticed you, Emily. I saw your talent, your sensitivity, and your strength. I am proud of the woman you have become, that you know how to stand up for your boundaries and shape your life according to your own rules. At the end of the letter, she added an invitation to visit her in Taos, where she has been living in retirement for several years. No obligations or conditions, just a place where you can regain your strength when you feel you need it. Your path belongs only to you, but I want you to remember, you don't have to walk it alone. I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling as if a heavy weight had fallen from my shoulders. Someone in my family truly understood me. Someone saw and acknowledged my truth. This was not yet a complete healing, but it was a first step, a crack in the wall of loneliness that had surrounded me since childhood. A few days later, another surprise awaited me. Daniel's number lit up on my phone screen. I hesitated for a few seconds before pressing accept, expecting to hear more reproaches. "Emily," he said quietly. "Can you spare a minute?" "I'm listening," I replied cautiously. "I've been thinking a lot about your words, about how you felt invisible all these years." He paused, then took a heavy breath. "You know, I think you're right." These words were the last thing I expected. Daniel, the family favorite, admitted that I had been treated differently. "After you moved, I started replaying the past in my head. And suddenly, I noticed things I hadn't seen before. How Mom and Dad constantly interrupted you, but never me or Ethan. How your successes were commented on with a quick, 'Well, that's nice,' and then the conversation immediately shifted back to us. How no one ever asked about your work, your art, or your friends." My breath caught in my throat. "Yes," was all I could say. "That's exactly how it was." "I'm sorry," he said sincerely. I didn't notice because I didn't have to fight for attention. Being the eldest in our family meant that recognition came automatically. I never thought about what it was like to be left on the sidelines. "Yes, you didn't have to," I confirmed calmly. "I'm not calling to pressure you about the wedding," he continued. "That's your decision, and I respect it. I just wanted you to know that I really hear you now. I see the problem. And I'm sorry that I unintentionally made it worse by taking up all the space and not noticing that you also wanted to be heard." Our conversation lasted almost an hour, the longest and most honest one we'd ever had. Daniel shared how hard it was for him to cope with our father's expectations, with the pressure of being the heir to the family name. I told him about my life in Denver, about my work, my art, the people who support me. And for the first time, we spoke not as the golden son and the forgotten daughter, but simply as a brother and sister, on equal terms. Before ending the conversation, Daniel hesitated for a moment and asked, "Do you think I could come visit you sometime?" "Not right now, but maybe in a few months. I'd like to see how you live, to see your work." "I'd be very happy," I answered sincerely. This conversation didn't erase all the old problems in one go, but it became another small crack in the thick wall that separated us. A hint that the path to healthier relationships was still possible. The wedding day came and went without my presence. I sent Ethan and Sarah a gift, my new canvas, an abstract depiction of unity and growth, and attached a card with simple wishes for happiness. I didn't know if they would accept it with warmth or set it aside as another sign that I do things my own way. But for me, the main thing was different. I marked their important moment as I saw fit, on my own terms. All this time, I continued to work at Aurora Design Studio, putting my heart and soul into projects, while also preparing for my exhibition. Denver became more and more like home with each passing day. The morning mists, the vibrant art scene, and new friends created a sense of a true home. Finally, the opening night arrived, the culmination of months of hard work and many years when my creativity had remained in the shadows. The small but respected gallery was full of guests, friends from the art collective, neighbors from my building, even Tom in his vintage suit, looking like he was from the 70s. I stood by my central piece, a large mixed media work titled, From Invisible to Visible. A local critic was asking questions about my concept and process, and I was sharing what had inspired me. At that moment, my attention was drawn to movement by the door. Daniel was standing there, looking a bit out of place in his business suit. And next to him, Aunt Diana. Our eyes met across the room, and Daniel gave a slight raise of his hand in an uncertain, almost shy greeting. I excused myself from the critic and went over to them. You came after all, I said, giving Aunt Diana a tight hug, and then, after a slight hesitation, Daniel as well. I wouldn't have missed this event, my aunt replied confidently. Your work is impressive, Emily, Daniel added, looking at the paintings on the walls. I had no idea you had so much talent. You never asked, I remarked calmly, without reproach, just stating a fact. He nodded, accepting my words. I'm asking now. The rest of the hour I spent showing them the hall, talking about each piece, the concept, the techniques, the feelings I tried to convey through color and form. They listened attentively, asked questions, and sincerely noted the details that touched them. Towards the end of the evening, Lauren came over with glasses of champagne. To Emily, she said, raising a toast. For finding her voice and bravely sharing it. I stood among people who saw me not as a role, but as a person. Who came to share my joy and recognition. And I felt a sense of peace settle within me. I understood that the journey was not over. True recovery is always a process, not a destination. But I had already done the most important thing. I had learned to value myself, to set boundaries, and to build a life that reflected my true self, not the shadow I had once been taught to be. Late in the evening, after the last guests had left the gallery and its owner had congratulated me on several sold works, I was walking home under the light drizzling rain of Denver. I thought about how much I had changed in 6 months, since I had decided to leave and start over. Sometimes, true courage is not staying and fighting for recognition at any cost. Sometimes, it's walking away and building a life where your presence is valued without a fight. Sometimes, the path to recovery is to redefine the very concept of family, to base it on respect, sincere attention, and the right to be yourself. As for Ethan's wedding and my parents' expectations, I'm still not sure if my choice was convenient for them. But I know for sure, it was the right one for me. And after many years of putting others' desires above my own, this was a victory worth celebrating. Has it ever happened to you that, in order to maintain self-respect, you had to step away from something or someone? What personal boundaries have you set, and how did those around you react? Share your experience in the comments, perhaps it will help someone else. If this story resonated with you, please support it with a like and subscribe to the channel to hear more stories about self-discovery and inner strength. Remember, your value does not depend on how clearly others see it. It has always been with you, it is constant, and it belongs only to you.